Hey, it's Tony Messia with the Charlotte Ledger, and you're listening to the Charlotte Ledger podcast. You can find out more about the Charlotte Ledger and subscribe to one of our newsletters by going to thecharlotteledger.com. Today's podcast is part of a special series we're doing in which we interview winners of the Charlotte Ledger's 40 Over 40 Awards. The recipients are people ages 40 and up who are making a big difference in the Charlotte area, people who saw a need and took action, whether it's in business, the nonprofit world, education, or another field. The winners are chosen by an impartial panel of independent judges. We accept nominations in January and celebrate the winners in an in-person event in April. You can find out more about all of that at ledger40over40.com. The host of today's podcast is Steve Dunn. Steve's a good guy, and in his day job, he's a mediator who offers dispute resolution services through the Charlotte office of Miles Mediation and Arbitration. Enjoy.
Welcome to the Charlotte Ledger podcast. I am Steve Dunn. Today, I'm joined by Manoj Kesavan, the founder and executive director of the company that puts on Boom, an arts festival that occurs in Charlotte. Welcome, Manoj.
Thank you. Good to see you, Steve.
How did Boom get started?
Long story. I'll try to condense it. So what you see as Boom kind of came from what we means we started as an artist collective. Informally, we used to meet for conversations. And I always use the plural we because it's always a group effort. So I'm fortunate to be the orchestrator of that for many years. So, we've been doing a lot of different collaborations. And in 2012, I and my then creative partner, Farron Franks, we got a artist residency at the McCall Center in 2012, which was also the year when the DNC was in town, Obama's re-election.
Well, the DNC comes to town in 2012. And
2012, yep.
The whole media attention of the entire, not just the United States, but of the world is focused on Charlotte, North Carolina, right? And so you and your creative collaborators decided to contribute to that in a way.
Yeah, so we already had a very diverse group of artists. We meet all the time. And strangely enough, there was no plans to showcase Charlotte arts, even though there were so many other things going on. But the host committee or nobody else had any plans to showcase our local or regional arts. So we kind of became it. So we ended up doing some 80 plus performances of spoken word, theater, music, everything, literally on the streets, which got, as you said, international attention. Like a month later, I was randomly looking at an Indian magazine and there was a photo of one of our performances on there because AP and Getty Images, they took photos and it went global. So that also really expanded our collective, which used to be a little bit more architecture, design, visual art focused. But that brought on board people like, Quentin Talley was part of it even before, but people like blues and, some of the amazing spoken word people. Dancers like Cameron Watson, Martha Connaughton, Audrey Barron, Caroline Kalush, like a lot of the best dancers in town, pretty much most independent companies. We all thought it was an amazing experience, and we wanted to see if we can keep that kind of spirit going, even without a huge media circus like the DNC.
So you've put on a series of kind of grassroots level performances in connection with the DNC.
Right. Performance as well as some large-scale art installations.
And then after the DNC leaves town, you're all still there. You're still energized with this.
Right.
You're still motivated to keep bringing performances like this or through these people to the Charlotte community.
Right.
And then, so how does that then turn into what we now all know as Boom?
We were, first of all, energized and exhausted. So, we launched the organization officially, like it became formalized into an organization in 2012. So to start with, such a huge thing was a little bit crazy looking back. It took us a few years to try to figure out what we want to do. So I know you are very familiar with, but I'm sure most listeners are familiar with the idea of fringe festivals. The big one, or the original one, started in Edinburgh to showcase what was too fringy, too edgy for the main Edinburgh Arts Festival. And then I think it was started in the 50s or 60s. It grew into maybe the largest art festival in the world. It's such a huge thing, and especially in UK. The idea is that they actually are on the fringes of the city in bars and coffee shops, and so places like that, and showcasing that what is at the fringes were the kind of the experimentation, the pushing of the envelope happens. So a lot of our artists have been going to fringe festivals in other parts of the country and sometimes the world, like Quentin On-Q has been to Edinburgh twice. So it was strange for us that we didn't have our own fringe festival. Like Asheville has had one for many years. Greensboro has had one for like 15 years. Atlanta, everyone else. So we thought that, we had $0, but we had a lot of, I think some of the best artists in town in our team. So we thought, let's try this.
Let's make a fringe festival. And the idea there is you're creating performances that are both off the beaten path in the sense of where they're physically performed, right? So maybe non-traditional spaces, not in the glittering and gleaming venues uptown, but out in the community, out in the suburbs, and in bars and restaurants and out on the street, as opposed to traditional theater spaces. Right. And then also that push boundaries creatively and perhaps are showing folks things that they haven't seen before or that.
Right. And, if you're a small, especially kind of an experimental theater or dance company or any kind of performance group, it's very hard to create a show and put it on by yourself. I mean, say renting the booth theater for a weekend, it's so beyond the capacity of most groups there. So Boom became kind of the space for that. Even now, like when you come to Boom, you'll see these really amazing shows. And that's the only place where they get to show that. Also, so, we do the selection very early on because to give them time to develop these shows. Because if they did not get selected for Boom, that show just won't happen. So we kind of became, and, we ourselves were so pleasantly surprised by the response we got. As you know well, even the very first year, we thought we'll have around 30 programs. That ballooned to 50. And by 2019, it was over 100. So in 4 years, it more than doubled in size.
And at this time, Boom is usually in the spring, right? Around the April timeframe.
It's always in a weekend in April.
Always on a weekend in April. And at that time, you're doing it in the Plaza Midwood neighborhood.
Right. Yeah. And 2019, so we did 4, 2016 to 2019. And 2020 was supposed to be our big 5th year. And then, of course, we had to pull the plug.
Something happened.
3 weeks before.
Yes. 2020. Yeah, you had a decision to make, right? So it was around March, I guess, that everything started shutting down in 2020. So the festival was well underway at that point. You were in the plan. The planning was done, and you were getting ready to put it on.
We have an 8-month timeline. So we were like 90% into the planning and decided to pull the plug like last week of March, like less than 3 weeks before, however, I think it comes to us being still, so we are still primarily an artist collective, even though we have the infrastructure of a nonprofit right now. We were able to quickly go online and do a small, we call it Boom in the Living Room that weekend. That was before everyone went online. This was in very early stages of the pandemic. And then, that summer when the nationwide protest started, we asked artists to respond and we got this amazing, overwhelming response, mostly from Black artists, of course, which ended up being a 3-part online showcase called Act Now, which again, I think we were the first and maybe the only major entity that asked artists to respond to, largest protests in nation's history. So the Black Lives Matter protests, all the aftermath of George Floyd killing. And, we feel so we're planning a small one online showcase. It became a 3-part showcase hosted by Blues. We did that in partnership with Charlotte's Creative and Black Market and Roll Up Charlotte.
So you find a way to continue being creative and sharing the creativity of Charlotte artists through the pandemic.
Right.
And as time goes on, as we come out of the pandemic, Boom takes on a new life at Camp North End.
Right. So, this spring, after 2 years, we were able to bring Boom back. It was slightly smaller than before. It was only 2 days. Even then, we had 60 plus programs over, Friday and Saturday. So, we brought it back this April. And now, we hope to go back to the pre-pandemic scale or maybe bigger in the coming April.
What's it like at Camp North End as opposed to Plaza Midwood in terms of putting on a festival like that?
We have a lot more space. So, the interesting thing Boom has become and how it's different from most other fringe festivals is that I feel like we have really expanded the definition of fringe. So if I might go a little geeky, the fringe space, so if you go to Atlanta Fringe or Asheville Fringe, it's still a very kind of a wide space, because what's considered edgy in theater, in dance, but it also mostly comes from more of that, most of them have, say, MFAs in theater or dance. So they come from that very conventional academic definition of the center as well as the fringe. However, partly because our collective itself is very, very diverse, racially, age-wise and everything. We were very intentional in, examining, what does fringe mean in today's society? So, to quote anthropologist David Graeber, who's kind of the philosopher of the Occupy movement, he says, culture is creative refusal. So culture as that happens when like a kind of an underclass or somebody pushes against the mainstream. Culture happens at that friction point. So if you look at American music, blues and rock and roll and pretty much all of that comes from the Black community. American culture, the fringe has been in the Black community. And I feel like, and so Boom is now a majority Black festival. And I think any major event in the US, especially in the South, would be majority Black if it was purely based on talent and if you're really trying to capture that point of cultural creation where new culture is actually being invented. So we feel like our success, or, at least in creating something that is truly representative of the diversity of the city, which, as you know very well, Charlotte is still a very segregated city. So if you go to any of the uptown institutions, you see that segregation, not just racially, age-wise, and economy-wise. Uptown is very elite in the sense that there's certain parts of the city you would not see there. So we've been able to transcend all that because I feel like we've been very constantly questioning what is the fringe, what is happening there. So yeah.
As you describe Boom's mission and its nature in reference to diversity and the tension that creates culture and art, what is the experience of someone who attends the festival? What do you see when you go there, and what do you have the opportunity to discover?
Yeah, so the most visible part, so there are two major parts to Boom. One is what we call Boom Fringe, which are the ticketed shows in indoor venues, to put it broadly.
So this might be like a play, or a dance performance,
right?
Something that's traditional in the sense that there's a time and a place, and you buy a ticket, and there's a person at the door, and you go in and you take your seat, and there's a little bit of the experience of attending the show that is reminiscent of what you might do in any kind of a show.
True,
but the subject matter that's on stage may be a little bit off the beaten path, as we've been discussing.
And another important component of Boom, again, I think that comes from the nature of the art scene in Charlotte. We have a very strong spoken word component. So we have had people like Blues or Boris Rogers, who's kind of the godfather of the spoken word scene here. Or Carlos Robson, Jay Ward, who kind of had a big creative leap in Boom 2018. He later on went on to become the first ever poet laureate of Charlotte. We are very proud of that, not to take any credit.
Well, and Charlotte is truly an epicenter of spoken word art.
Exactly.
Worldwide.
Which a lot of people here don't know. A lot of the media here doesn't know.
Right.
So what Boom allows is that, people do that is, it's like for a comedian to go to a little evening, little 10-minute segment at a club to do a HBO special or Netflix special, take their act to the next level, create an hour-long, one-person storytelling experience. So again, Boom is the only place that you see that in Charlotte. And we feel like because of that, a lot of artists like Jay Ward has been able to take the art to the next level. So yeah, spoken word is a big part. So there's all that, back to your question about what you see at Boom. So there's this really amazing kind of very, performance of dance, theater, spoken word. A lot of stuff don't really, as you know, we had a rock opera.
Yeah, there's music. I quite memorably for a few years ago recall a performance that was a bass clarinet player and a drum machine or something. It was very much off the beaten path.
Or True Lobster they had a tiny tent where only 4 people can attend at a time.
Yeah, it's challenging and interesting stuff. You had a guy set up a tent in a parking lot that had kind of a light show displayed on the inside of
inflatable igloo.
A giant igloo, right? So it's a little. So there's wonder, there's surprise, certainly with respect to the ticketed performances.
Right.
And then there's this other side of the festival that you refer to as the intersection.
Right. Which is, again, it's kind of came from what we felt was the need in the city. So that's the most visible side. So when most people talk about Boom, they're basically talking about the intersection, which is in Plaza Medud. It used to happen in the little gravel lot across from Common Market. Right now, or this year, it was at the Boiler Yard, the big main space at Cam North End. Although Cam North End, we have also took over that whole raceway. This is that big passageway leading up to it.
Well, and these are performances that are just kind of just one after another going on all the time.
We have several bands, again, like some of the best bands in town perform. We have like aerial dance. We'll have chalk artists doing their, work on the asphalt. So yeah, it's pretty much, and like some bigger entities like the symphony brought some of the musicians to Charlotte. So like I think 2019 we had the opera bring a little piece of opera to there. So that's where the whole kind of creative ecosystem converges. So from the very established organizations to like chalk artists and muralists. And
as you're walking around, you never know what you might stumble upon.
Right.
And the next, you may be watching a band play, and then the next performance up on the same stage is a really interesting dance performance.
Right.
And so it's there's sort of something for everyone, and it's a place where you can go and just take it as it comes. And
right.
Be spontaneous.
Yeah. And, often I would say, be surprised by, we didn't know this was all, this was there in Charlotte. All this crazy stuff was happening here.
You've referred to the organization behind Boom as a collective, and you've referenced its diversity, which you describe as being somewhat unique in Charlotte. It's a collective comprising largely a group of artists, people who are creators themselves. And I wonder what it means to you and what it means to Boom to be an artist-driven organization in that way.
This is funny. So very early on, Tom Gabbard, I'm sure everyone knows, the head of Blumenthal, who's been a wonderful advisor. And while we were talking about something, he's said something like, your strength and weakness seems to be your artist-run organization or something like that. So the good side is, like I said, during the pandemic, when everything just froze, we were able to quickly pivot and go online and also, respond to the crisis instead of being completely frozen by it. Another thing we did during the pandemic is we partnered with Charlotte Journalism Collaborative, which is, a collective of some of the larger entities like the Observer, WCNC, La Noticia, Q Notes, Queen City Metro. So we partnered local, mostly artists of color, with journalists and did a series of graphic stories about the pandemic, which was later collected into a book, which is like a fascinating snapshot of this, this unique time in history. So
it sounds like being an artist-led organization enables you in a way to act quickly and to respond artistically to the news of the day in a way, but at the same time, and in reference to what Gabbard said, like there's a challenging aspect to that too.
Right. So, artists don't get up to do the same thing over and over again. So we are great in responding to crisis, to challenges. However, it's still herding cats.
Right. And somebody's got to, order the porta-johns and get the insurance but
which thank you. You helped with that a lot several times.
Well, you're calling me out as a former board member of Boom.
Board chair.
I was involved in a volunteer capacity.
Well, even before joining the board, you were helping with those things.
Well, yes, this is true. I do my part, but it seems to me that having creative people be at the heart of the company and playing such integral roles in its organization gives Boom a certain spirit, a certain way that you reflect upon Charlotte and the world.
Yeah, no, definitely. And again, we feel like we've been able to transcend a lot of the challenges. I mean, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, all that, which, a lot of people talk about, but that's not often reflected in not only their programming. So as you know, our organization, the core group is very diverse. Board is now majority Black. So that diversity is reflected at every level. So it's not just the programming. It's not just the window dressing, which is not true for most other groups. But as we, grow as an organization, we also, as you said, need some of those structures. There are so much of running an organization, which is not creative, which is not very exciting. It's very repetitive. So there's always kind of that friction between kind of balancing those things.
Yeah, it's a tough challenge. I think a lot of organizations have that challenge. And I think one of the things that any organization has to decide is sometimes there's a tension between growing and getting bigger and doing more versus just repeating the same thing over and over again and doing what we do well. And there's really, honestly, there's a lot to be said for both.
Right.
And so it's a balancing act, right?
Right.
Well, speaking of Charlotte, we're here speaking on the Charlotte Ledger podcast, and we both live in Charlotte. I can't help but notice in speaking with you, Manoj, that you're not originally from Charlotte. And
I don't know how you could tell.
Well, but you've been here for a while. I mean, you've seen a bit of Charlotte's past, and I hope that you'll see quite a bit of Charlotte's future. What are your observations about this town, and where do you see us heading into the future?
Well, so, I've been here for 20 years, which is hard to believe. It's the longest I've lived in any place. It feels a little bit strange when I talk about it. Although, I mean, like I said, it's only in 2012 before that, I used to be a full-time architect. So only half the time here, that's when I plunged into starting a nonprofit with no idea what I was getting into, because I had never written a grant application or, had to deal with any of that. So I think also it gives me an interesting perspective, even though coming from a very creative field, but at the same time, not being in the whole kind of nonprofit arts sector. Well, I think it's not news to say that funding is a huge problem. I mean, funding is a huge problem for arts everywhere, in the US at least. However, particularly in Charlotte, I don't know I'm sure you know about the Art and Science Council did a big equity audit back in 2020, and it showed that only like 3.5% or less of their funding historically has gone to artists and organizations of color combined. And that if you remove the Gann Center from that, it drops like 1%. So in a city which has 55% people of color, so there's all those very structural problems. And also, I feel like in a lot of ways, we are still kind of stuck in that McCall era when it comes to what is considered art and what needs to be supported. So, again, this is my personal perspective. And people like the leadership of McCall, when they were trying to build a new city, when Charlotte was really growing, so they had a checklist of things. We need a performing arts center. We need a proper museum. We need a, symphony, opera, things like that. The Art and Science Council was kind of created to support that. And that's what they were primarily doing, they support these few entities who also have city-owned buildings. So they're rent-free. And the whole arts infrastructure was set up to support those. And we haven't been able to evolve out of that, which makes it very hard for grassroots groups, artist-led organizations, and class and race are very intertwined in the US. So, artist organizations of color, especially. Just in the last 6 years, I think you saw On-Cue Productions, Cast, recently Actors Theater, they all go under. So it's as if unless you are born in the right part of town, unless you're created or within that, almost like that uptown bubble, it's just hard to survive in the city, which makes it, such a hard grind for a lot of grassroots groups. So you're all constantly stuck in that cycle of poverty.
So how's it going to change? What is the future then, right?
Yeah, well, maybe it needs to be a generational change. So,
well, that's actually a great segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is the fact that you are known for being over 40. You are a winner of the prestigious Charlotte Ledger 40 over 40 award. And as time keeps passing and as we all keep getting older, I wonder how you reflect on the lessons that you've learned throughout life, not with respect to your work or Boom, but as a person, as you look back over the years, and whether you respond with words of wisdom or advice for a younger person, I'm curious to hear what things are you currently on your mind as the most important lessons learned through life.
I'm not a very introspective person, straight.
Really?
Yeah, as you know, I have a background in history and theory in art and architecture. So I am constantly kind of trying to analyze globally. And my background is also my focus has been in art movements. So the major movements, like what changed the course of cultural history and all that. So I feel like a lot of the work we do is informed by that, and a lot of my thinking is informed by the work we do. So I'm constantly kind of like the whole idea of that culture is creative refusal. That's a thing I came across a couple of months ago. So I'm constantly kind of updating my theoretical framework as we try new things. At the same time, it's as from a personal kind of reflection, maybe it's my escapism. I try not to think about it. Partly also maybe because of all the challenges. Maybe it's better not to think about it because it's something that the unfortunate thing again is, like I said, all these wonderful organizations which come and go. There's a way this kind of work grinds you down. So maybe it's maybe a kind of an unconscious thing about, let's not think about it.
I'm going to have you back.
Yeah.
When you win the Charlotte Ledger 70/70 award,
Right.
We'll come back and we'll talk about reflections on the last 20 years or so.
Right.
And I look forward to that day. Manoj, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Where can our listeners find out more information about you and your organization and the Boom Festival?
Well, about me, I don't know why anybody would want to, but maybe they should just Google my name. But Boom has boomcharlotte.org is our website, and we are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We are not on TikTok yet.
It's only a matter of time.
It's only a matter of time. We are, I think, still mostly millennial dominated as a group. A lot of the people I mentioned, like Blues and Q and Cameron, they're all that millennial group. But we have new people coming in, Gen Z people. So hopefully we'll be on Twitter soon.
Well, you have to come
soon.
up with some of those 30 under 30s. And I don't know if are there 20 under 20s? Maybe we need to get a hold of some of those and bring about some of that generational change that you referenced. That always is and always will be the key to progress and advance.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like I said, I think we are still stuck in that kind of a value system of a previous generation. And I think that is slowly changing.
Well, Manoj, thanks so much for being with me today. Check out boomcharlotte.org for more information about the Boom Festival. And we'll see you there in April at Camp North End.
Thank you, Steve. Always so great to talk with you.
That's it for today. The Charlotte Ledger podcast is produced by Lindsey Banks. You can find out more about the Charlotte Ledger at thecharlotteledger.com. And you can find out more about our 40 over 40 awards at ledger40over40.com.